Women's rights are the rights and entitlements claimed for women and girls worldwide. These rights and entitlements were the basis for the women's rights movement in the 19th century and the feminist movement during the 20th century. Today, we will commemorate women's rights milestones by looking back on three pivotal moments in female history. The first milestone we will discuss today is women's suffrage and the right to vote. The suffrage movement is quite possibly the most well-known historical milestone in women's history. On August 18, 1920, women were finally given the right to vote with the 19th Amendment to the Constitution after almost a century of political protests. It all started 100 years ago in the 1820s, when women began to gather in various reform groups to protest gender-restrictive laws that prevented them from owning property, voting in elections, and even claiming income for their own hard work. By 1848, activists began to organize on a national scale when they organized the Siena Falls Convention, one of the many political platforms that would eventually push the American government to allow women basic human rights. The Susan Anthony Amendment granted women the right to vote. More than 8 million women across the U.S. voted in elections for the first time that year. The second milestone we will discuss is women's right to work and earn equal pay. The wage gap is still a hot topic in today's business environment. But did you know that women can actually sue an employer if they feel excluded or paid less based on their gender? In 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed the Equal Pay Act, which forces employers to pay men and women the same wage for the same position. In the past, women earned far less than men, even if they performed the exact same work duties. Now, it's perfectly legal to take action against businesses if a woman can prove that her boss is paying her male counterparts a higher salary for otherwise an equal type of job. Considering our progress today, it is difficult to believe that women haven't been working all that long. It wasn't until World War II, when working men were in short supply while overseas for the war, that women were allowed to enter the workforce. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was responsible for granting basic human rights at work, stating that employers may not discriminate against people on the basis of race, color, religion, or gender. The third and final milestone we will discuss is a women's right to sexual wellness. In the early 1980s, the sex-positive feminist movement began. Women knew that consensual sex, whether heterosexual or not, was a mutually pleasurable experience, and this notion is still heavily preached today. Sex-positive feminism has evolved to cover not only intimate physical relationships, but also the sex work industry. The now sex-positive/sexual wellness movement is making waves in the 2000s and creating equal opportunities for all genders, body types, sexual identities, and sensual experiences. At 20 years old, I am proud to be a woman and everything that it represents. My journey to researching women's rights is a fairly new one, as I had just recently completed my first women's studies course in the spring of 2020. My key takeaway from that course is that it's important to realize that change doesn't happen overnight. But with enough persistence and feminine power, we can conquer anything. In addition, it is important to celebrate the triumphs of the past, but also continue to push for an even better future for women and girls alike. Keep in mind that there are still some fundamental rights that remain at risk for American women today. Some examples of these include reproductive choice, sexual harassment in the workplace, complete equal pay, and domestic violence. However, many women and allies of today are rising and will continue to rise until all women's rights are no longer at risk. Thank you for listening to my commemorative speech on women's rights milestones in female history. If you want to learn more about women's rights and what you can do, go to www.awid.com. There, you will find a global feminist membership movement that is working to achieve gender justice and women's human rights worldwide. Let's continue to create women's rights milestones for a generation to come.